Welcome back. I think that we have enough of our group to go ahead and begin without getting too far behind schedule. So welcome back to you all. It is my great pleasure to introduce our next speaker, who is Louise Witherspoon Williams. Louise is the president of the Freedom Quilting Bee Legacy, the community organization which serves the people of Alberta and Boykin, Alabama. Pardon? Good. Can everyone hear okay? Yeah. Okay. I thought I heard something in the back. Okay. Yesterday, many of us had the opportunity to visit the Freedom Quilting Bee Legacy, which, as Kim Kelly, who was our guide there yesterday, pointed out, is a bucket list destination. And I know that's true for many of us, including myself. While we were there, we had the privilege to meet, learn from, and share lunch with the world-renowned quilters of Eugene Bend. Also, while we were there, we saw a photo on the wall of a young girl in a red dress that was taken during the dedication ceremony of the original Freedom Quilting Bee in 1969. And that little girl was none other than Louise Witherspoon Williams. Louise was born and raised in Alberta, Alabama. She graduated from Pine Hill High School in 1977 and moved to Mobile to further her education, graduating from 20th Century Business College in 1979. Louise has traveled domestically and internationally with her husband of 43 years, Eugene, and her twin daughters, Tamika and Jamika, who are also here today with her. Yesterday on our trip, we also learned about Louise's mother, Estelle Witherspoon, who was the voice and heartbeat of the original Freedom Quilting Bee, which she co-founded in 1966. Like many members of the early Freedom Quilting Bee, Estelle was active in the civil rights movement, marching multiple times with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., including the Selma to Montgomery March in 1965. Louise follows in her mother's footsteps to continue to enrich the lives of the people in Alberta and surrounding communities and to share the gifts the people of these communities bring to the world. Louise, we welcome you.
Thank you, Kelsey. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. It is my pleasure to absolutely be here and greet all of you. I thank Kelsey, Hetty, Lindsay, and all of the organizers of work who actually sought us out to invite us. And we invited you to do the trip yesterday. So I think it was a wonderful beginning. So I'm glad to be here today. As you know, as you've heard, my name is Louise Witherspoon Williams, and I'm the current president of the Freedom Quilting Bee Legacy. My daughters, Tamika and Jamika, as you heard also, are here with me today, and we're grateful to be here. My husband, now of 45 years, as of today, it's our wedding anniversary. Today, he's staying at home and he's keeping our beloved Riri. I was so jealous when I saw her dog and he was so quiet, or she was so quiet and calm. Riri would have been all over this place. Okay, you all would have been looking like, what? So it was best that he kept her there. So she just loves and has to be and see everybody. But thank you for having us today. It is my honor to be here and to share information with you about my family, my community, the Freedom Quilting Bee, and the Freedom Quilting Bee Legacy. But sometimes, it's more impactful to say, as they said when I was growing up in my community, to hear it from the horse's mouth. So I would like to play a little bit of a video and share that with you all today, and then I'll get back to the story. Thank you. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
woke up this morning with my mind stayed on freedom.
In 1966, a remarkable business sprang up in Wilcox County, Alabama, one of the poorest counties in the nation. A group of middle-aged Black women with little education or business experience formed a cooperative to market their unique handmade quilts to the art and fashion world. The Freedom Quilting Bee not only improved living conditions for its members, but inspired other cooperatives nationwide and fostered a new appreciation for quilts as an art form. Here is the unlikely success story of an organization created with Fingers of Love.
Hallelujah, freedom.
There are a few of us who knows about our parents, you know, how hard it was for them to get it started and how helpful it was for them that struggle harder to keep it going. But there's some of us work right here don't even remember when it was started, you know. So it don't have no meaning for them.
He named it Freedom Quilting Bee because it was free. I had an open doors to anybody come in. And that's why we named it the Freedom Quilting Bee. It was free for everybody who wanted to come.
The Freedom Quilting Bee was firmly rooted in the civil rights movement. Its inspiration came from Francis Walter, an Episcopal priest who had returned to his native Alabama in 1965 to work for the movement through the Selma Interreligious Project. His efforts focused on the state's Black Belt region, including Wilcox County. There, as throughout the South, Black citizens were being evicted from their homes and fired from their jobs in retaliation for registering to vote.
We were trying to get depositions from everybody who was being evicted with the idea that we could activate part of the Civil Rights Act that had just been passed that said you can't evict somebody for registering to vote. And not knowing the county, we drove down this rather small road and just ended up at the riverbank with a couple of skiffs. And we saw this house. There were these beautiful quilts hanging on the line. They were just like op art, which was popular then. And I was really struck with how beautiful they were. And so Everett and I just said, well, let's just get out and go and talk to the woman about the quilts. So when we got out of the car, this woman ran into the woods from out of the house, and it was very sad, embarrassing. But we had sense enough then to know why. We were white, she didn't know who we were, so she didn't trust us.
But the quilts gave Father Walter an idea for boosting the income of poor Black families.
It was pretty obvious with all this intense support in the North for the Civil Rights movement that liberal people in the North, particularly, artsy people, would probably like to buy these quilts. So I had a friend, Tom Screven, who was from Alabama and real supportive of what I was doing in the Civil Rights movement. And Tom, I contacted him and he thought he could get an artist loft from somebody and have an auction. So I got word out on both sides of Alabama River that I would buy quilts.
With a $700 grant in his pocket, Father Walter began buying quilts for $10 apiece. Because the average annual income of Black families in Wilcox County was just a little more than $1,000, a single sale meant a 1% increase in a family's earnings.
From Highway 5, Alberta, down to Gee's Bend, there really were quilts piled up on the side of the road and people standing there waiting. And I just drove up and handed out $10 bills and folded the quilts up and put them in the trunk in the back of my car. And told people we would got everybody's name and address and we'd be in touch with them later.
I thought that was a break for us to have something we do with our hand to get some out. Because we wasn't used to nothing but the field. We farmed for our living. grew cotton and corn, peas and peanuts and sweet potato syrup. See, that was all we knowed about. We didn't have no jobs here in the country like people do in the cities.
Among the many women Father Walter met was Minder Coleman of Gee's Bend. Mrs. Coleman had participated in the Gee's Bend Agricultural Co-op, one of the most successful economic development efforts of Roosevelt's New Deal.
She told me that they had woven cloth for a suit for Franklin Roosevelt. And so she said, well, we could have us a quilt co-op or something like that. Well, I didn't know what a cooperative was legally, so.
Father Walter had an attorney draw up papers for incorporating a cooperative, and on March 26, 1966, some 60 women gathered at the Antioch Baptist Church in Camden to form the Freedom Quilting Bee. Estelle Witherspoon was elected president.
I worked hard all my life. If I heard of anything that would try to make us become better livers and better people in the community and everything, I'd ready to go for it. So I wanted things to be well with us. And not only well with me and my husband and my children, I wanted it well with people. And if I could do anything to help, I always tried.
The evening following the co-op's incorporation, a group of volunteers staged the first of 2 New York auctions of Wilcox County quilts. The quilts were pieced together from worn-out dresses and overalls with old flour and sugar sacks as backing. Elizabeth Walter, who was studying art at the University of Alabama while her husband worked for the Selma Interreligious Project, describes why the patchworks caught the attention of New Yorkers.
The Freedom Quilting Bees' boldness, not only in their design qualities and in their color, had an overall verve and a vibrancy to them that you rarely saw in Appalachian quilts or quilts coming, say, out of the Midwest. There was a movement toward minimalism within the New York art scene, and these quilts from Wilcox County seemed to mirror the movement that the country was looking at in terms of avant-garde art too. They certainly were complementary to the paintings of the period.
The 2 New York auctions raised an additional $3,000 for the quilters and led to other valuable connections. The quilts caught the attention of one of New York's most sought-after interior decorators, who ordered quilted fabric from Wilcox County to use in her designs.
The publicity that was generated by that one order was like a skyrocket going off. That was the real launching of the national marketing effort of the Freedom Quilting Bee.
For the next few years, home decorating features spotlighting freedom quilts appeared repeatedly in Vogue and other national magazines. Quilts, which Americans had cherished as sentimental and sometimes useful relics of a bygone era, had suddenly become art and high fashion. In July of 1967, the Freedom Quilting Bee was invited to participate in the Smithsonian Folklife Festival in Washington, D.C. It was the quilters' first trip outside Alabama.
We put up our quilt exhibit on the mall, and there were all these sorts of things going on, and there were some black gospel groups singing, and somebody said, some of the women, including Ms. Witherspoon, said, well, we can sing as good as they can. So these 4, middle-aged women walked right up there in front of, probably 2,000-3,000 people in the mall in Washington and sang some of their church music.
I always said I wasn't going to quilt on Sunday. But when I got to Washington, the Smithsonian, I quilted on Sunday. Started quilting at 11 o'clock and quilted till 5. Why? Because I felt the need of doing something to help bring something back here to help us keep on keeping on.
During the first 2 years of the Quilting Bee's existence, Estelle Witherspoon traded her role of co-op president for that of manager, sometimes receiving a paycheck, sometimes not. Income from quilting was still just a supplement for the co-op members who continued to work in the fields to support their families.
We didn't have no money to pay nobody too much or nothing like that, because if we were paid by the quilt, you know, and we 5 or 6 of us was quilting on a quilt. Well, when we got the quilt, got the money back, we sent the quilt off and sell it. And sometimes we got $2 a piece to take home. Sometimes we got $1.50 to take home. But it was good, but we wasn't getting nothing.
We was used to being poor. When you're used to stuff, it ain't hard. We was used to being poor. Do you know, when I was a girl, I used to work from sun up till it down for 25 cents a day.
Some of the husbands began to say that they could do better at home by sitting there looking at them or whatnot, than come up here and make $2. But see, what we were trying to do, we were trying to build this place. So if one day it's like we are now, we have more work to do than we had.
Hand-stitched quilts based on traditional American patterns are imported from countries where workers earn pennies an hour, vastly undercutting the prices of U.S.-made quilts.
You know, we still sell a few, but not a whole lot of them to keep it going on.
Okay, so everyone thunderstorm, until 2:45, it's okay, not a tornado. Just when we let you know what the other is, we just stay in place, we fine. If we get any other changes, we'll deal with it like that. All right, I think that's what I think we can. Okay.
Thank you. So it's always good to know that technology works, doesn't it? Wonderful. Okay. So that was a little bit of a story. And like I said, hearing it from the horse's mouth sometimes gives you a little bit more of an impact on what was happening during that time. Even though I was born during that time, it was my way of life. It didn't hit me until later on as to what was really happening during that time. But that's an amazing story, as I've heard from many of the amazing stories here today, just today. And it reminded me, as I listened to most of you all who got up and spoke today, is how much more we are similar than we are not. So, and I think that's a great thing. So, the Freedom Quilting Bee was named, or affectionately, as we used to call it, the Bee, was named in honor of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. During this time, one of the main ways of travel from getting from our little community, which used to be called Rehoboth, now it's called Alberta, and Gee's Bend, but now it's Boykin, was actually by a ferry that ran across the Alabama River from Gee's Bend to Camden, which was the county seat. And during that time, people were trying to register to vote. They had to go to Camden to do things like shop, eat, see a doctor, take care of legal business, and register to vote. The county officials decided to close the ferry when they found that people were using it to really to get to Camden to actually register to vote. And there were numbers of Black people that were increasing registering to vote because they had that means. So they closed the ferry and knew that that would hinder them because most people in those communities did not have vehicles. They still traveled in wagons or walked and that kind of stuff because they farmed and they were there on the property. So they thought that by, closing down the ferry would stop it. Dr. King actually heard about it. Him and his comrades, they heard about it. And he actually came to our community in 1965. Dr. King came on a February, rainy, wet, in the country, muddy roads, dirt roads night, storming, much as maybe what's going to happen outside soon. But he came to our community. And in his speech, he said, "There is no person, Black or white, in Wilcox County that is better than you. When Black people register to vote and begin to vote, that is when you will get your freedom." Dr. King was assassinated on April the 4th, 1968. The groundbreaking for the Freedom Quilting Bee building was held in August of that year. So his death, his assassination and all of that was really fresh on everybody's mind when that was going on. So it was just automatic that we would name, or my parents and them, they would name the quilting bee in his honor and because of the freedom that we hope to get. My mother, as you saw, is Estelle Witherspoon. She was one of the co-founders of the Freedom Quilting Bee. During her tenure with the bee from its creation in 1966 to her retirement in 1995, she wore many hats. She was co-founder, she was president, she was janitor, she was cook, she was whatever was needed. And she loved doing it. As you saw from the video, she said she did it because of her love of people. She and what I called a band of ladies. There were some men, you saw a few there. My dad was in the picture as well, in the video as well. So there were some men who helped, but this is primarily a story of some real driven women. So, and you'll see how they brought this together. So these women were working together to bring about in existence, a better way of life for their families, for the people in the community, and it impacted the world. When I was growing up, as you heard in the video, Wilcox County was thought of and said to be the poorest county in Alabama. And I would bet you it's probably still that way today. If you check the books and the treasurer's amounts in the budget, you'll probably see that that's still the same today. So much was needed during that time to improve the lives of Black people in the community. And truth be told, some white people as well. So unless you were a landowner and you had lots of land that you allowed people to sharecrop on and farm for you, you were working and scratching just like everybody else. So through a shared love of wanting to help themselves and each other, these women banded together, and with the efforts of people like Reverend Walter, Stanley Selingat, Deirdre Boniface, and corporations like the Federation of Southern Cooperatives, they created the Freedom Quilting Bee in 1966. In the video, you heard Reverend Walter speak about the fact of why he came to Wilcox County. It was because the organization that he worked for, the Selma Interreligious Project, had heard about people being evicted from their homes simply because they were registering to vote. So they came down to say, what can we do to help? How can we help this? But I bet you none of them thought that help would come in the form or the creation of a sewing center, and especially a sewing center ran by women, middle-aged Black women. Nobody would have thought about that. The civil rights movement was in full force at that time. So this was a motivation for people to help themselves and help their families. You heard the people in the video talk about they had an idea to sell quilts. But, quilting for us and for them, not me, but quilting for them was not an art form. It was not. It was simply a way of life. It was simply a way to keep warm. They couldn't go to department stores and buy blankets or any of those things because they didn't have the money to do it, but they had a gift. They could make their own. So, but still, you know, all the quilts that Father Walter said he got from there, that he said he, you know, picked up from on the side of the road. These were quilts that people just did generations after generations after generations. And it was something that was passed down and on to those different generations, but it wasn't done as an art form. It was simply done as a means of survival. Many families are still doing that today. Working from the quilting bee, people were able to do things like purchase stoves for their homes, washing machines and dryers, refrigerators, send their children to college. And there are many who are in our community now who have received master's and doctorate degrees based on their parents' work that began during the days in the 60s from the Freedom Quilting Bee. And that generation in the 60s has uplifted many generations and is still going on today, which is what we call our legacy. During the 60s and prior to that time, in our part of the world, quilts and quilting, like I said, was not an art form. But, you know, they kept it going and they did it because they took pride in it and they knew that it was something that was given to them, that was handed down to them, and something that they should continue. You heard my mom and a fellow co-founder, Miss Nettie Young, speak about not having anything. They didn't have anything. So whatever they were able to get, my mom said sometimes they would get $2, sometimes they wouldn't. But whatever it was more than what they had, and they could build on that. So that was the promise that they were working on, they were looking at. So it's still good for me to look back and think about this. As I said, quilting wasn't an art form. It was simply for them a means of survival. When they looked at their products, and these women were certainly artists, but when they looked at their products, they didn't see it as through the eye of an artist. They saw it through the eye of a survivor, the eye of a quilter. And that was what was most important. It was handed down, like I said, from generation to generation. My great-grandmother handed it down. I'm sure it was handed down to her before. My great-grandmother handed it to my grandmother. My grandmother handed it to my mother. Unfortunately, I missed that gene. I didn't get that. I didn't get the quilting. I heard one of the ladies speak today and said she got the quilting, she didn't get the cooking. I was the opposite. I got the cooking, I didn't get the quilting. But that's okay. I still got something else from my mom. I got her love of family, her love of community, her love of people, her love of wanting, as you heard her say, wanting everything to be well for everybody. So, and even though I don't quilt, I think I can still add a little bit of something to that mix. And I continue that with my daughters. My daughter Jamika worked with our Speakers Bureau to arrange your visit yesterday. She was working with Patty and Chelsea and Lindsay, and was able to arrange to get you guys down there and have a program put in place that you could see a little bit of this history that we're talking about. My daughter Tamika is going to be working with us they're going to volunteer. She's going to volunteer and work with us to put our SOPs in place, our standard operating procedures in place, and a lot of our operational stuff that we'll need going forward. So the tradition does continue. It might not be continuing with that needle and thread, but it's continuing. So as the idea of the bee grew, and they found people would like to purchase their wares. And by the way, they sold much more than just quilts. They made pillows, they made placemats, they made conference bags, they made bonnets, they made aprons. It was amazing how people responded to their products when they were out there. So they realized that, okay, we're going to make these things, but we need a place to gather collectively to do this. My parents opened our home. You saw that in the video. My parents opened our home as a place for them to quilt collectively. Our home at that time was made a little strange. There were 2 rooms on each side, and there was a breezeway in the middle that was open on both ends. And so in the spring and the summer, the ladies would sit in that breezeway and quilt. In the winter, they would sit over in one of the larger rooms that were in our home. And all of them, they still quilted at their individual homes as well. But as that continued, they knew that a building. They needed a place in order to do this collectively. So what they thought about then was that, how are we going to do that? So through the efforts of the co-founders, the board of directors, community members, they raised money. They sold dinner plates at church or on Saturday. And, here we're having chicken and collard greens, some of maybe what you all had yesterday. And so they sold plates. They had made homemade ice cream. They did all of that kind of stuff. They went out and they got grants from different organizations through the Federation's help. They were able to get grants. They were able to get loans. And so with all of that, they were able to take care of that. And then they did something that was unheard of for Black people in Wilcox County in that time. They purchased land from a white-owned land, which was also unheard of. So these were unprecedented times, but it was certainly a time that was bringing about a change. So everything was wonderful, and we're glad about all of that. So on March 8th of 1969, the design that was done by architect Martin Steen, construction began on the Freedom Quilting Bee building. The bee was operated by women, many of whom did not have more than a 5th grade education. This small band of unknown yet talented quilters became one of the few all-Black women's cooperatives in the nation. The bee employed an average of 25 to 150 women annually as they would, continue to produce their wares and everything, depending on how many orders they received. Most of the women who worked at the bee came from Alberta or Boykin, which is called Gee's Bend, and surrounding communities. Some even came even as far as from 30 or 40 miles away to work at the bee. The bee gave them an opportunity to not only provide economic stimulus for their families and the community, but allowed them to travel, as you heard, outside of Wilcox County, which many of them had not done before. Through their travels, they experienced educational and cultural growth. They traveled from state to state, spreading the word of God and the message that all men and women are created equal. And all the while sharing the beauty of their craft, sharing the things that they made by hand. It was wonderful, and they were happy to do it. One of the highlights of the bee's history, as you heard Reverend Walter speak about in the video, was when they went to the Smithsonian in Washington in 1967. This was the first trip outside of Wilcox County for many of those ladies. First time many of them ever flew on an airplane. First time that many of them had ever known anything about Washington, D.C., but they went there and they won the show. Mm-hmm. People were amazed at the talent and artistry of the women. As they traveled, not only did they tell their story, but the quilts told their story as well. They told a story of how people of little means from one of the poorest counties in the state of Alabama could succeed. Even more amazing was the fact that these women were generating income and sustaining the family while their husbands stayed at home and farmed. That was unheard of. So the Freedom Quilting Bee's products were marketed and sold by such reputable outlets as Bloomingdale's, Saks, Teller, Lord & Taylor, and they acquired a major contract, which was a turning point for the quilting bee, with Sears and Roebuck, that sold their products for years. And they also had articles in such magazines such as Vogue and other national magazines. After Dr. King's assassination on April the 4th in 1968, my dad, Eugene, and Father Walter traveled to Atlanta to attend his funeral. They presented Mrs. Coretta Scott King with a queen-size, multicolored, double-star quilt made by the ladies from the Freedom Quilting Bee in honor of Dr. King. In 1970, the Freedom Quilting Bee was asked to create a monumental quilt, 44 feet by 20 feet, to be hung on the front of a building. This was in Houston, Texas, and it was hung on an upscale department store for a week when they had a festival going on, and bunches of people were amazed at that. Recently, we found out that part of that quilt has actually been saved and has actually been donated to the Brooklyn Museum as a gift from a Mr. and Mrs. Gould, who traveled to the bee in the 70s and purchased that section of the 3-story quilt. So the legacy continues. Textile manufacturing went overseas to Asia after the implementation of the North American Free Trade Agreement signed in 1994. It became cheaper to manufacture textiles outside of the United States. For those economic reasons, the bee closed its doors in 2012. The building remained dormant until 2020, when a community resident who had moved away years ago returned and wondered what could she do to help revive this legacy, revive this, and keep this bee going. She went and thought about it, and so she started to do just that. She began an aggressive effort. She organized meetings with community members. She met a newcomer who some of you all met yesterday, Kim Kelly, who's now our executive director. And they began to work with organizations like the Federation of Southern Cooperatives to reinvigorate the Freedom Quilting Bee. But it wasn't redone as a manufacturing production. It is now a museum and a nonprofit. So we hope you all enjoyed seeing that history there yesterday and seeing our progress as we continue. The reopening of the bee was wonderful. In 2021, we were able to actually establish the Freedom Quilting Bee Legacy. The Legacy's mission is to be an artistic-minded organization founded on the unique artistry and skill of the local women and using the strength of our history to continue the support of our community while communicating and connecting and creating global relationships. The legacy honors our predecessors by continuing to provide outreach and resources to our community. We received grants from several organizations, and with those grants, we're doing things like offering museum tours and tours of historical sites to educate our young people and some of our adults who still haven't ventured too far out of Wilcox County. We're also doing things to provide resources for the community, such as provide CPR classes. In Alberta, in Gee's Bend, if there was an emergency, it would take an ambulance over 1 hour to get there. And that would be if we were lucky. No rain, no bad weather, no whatever the problem might be, just to get from where it was called, either Camden or Selma, to get to Alberta or Boykin, it would take them at least over an hour. So CPR is a needed thing in that community. We also offered things like dental clinics. We provided smoke detectors for people to put in their homes who had never had them before. We're offering swimming lessons and much more. Freedom Quilting Bee plans to also build a community center with a computer lab and other resource buildings on the property. We also sponsor an annual festival called Airing of the Quilts, which some of you heard about yesterday when you were there. This year, the festival will be held October 3rd and the 4th, and on County Road 29, which leads all the way from Alberta all the way down to Boykin, Gee's Bend. You can actually go to our website at freedomquiltlegacy.org or airingofthequilts.org to find out more. I am thrilled to share that last week, Adidas signed on as a presenting sponsor for the 2025 festival. Adidas has a relationship with the quilters of the community, and in collaboration, they have designed and made uniforms in the Gee's Bend style for the football teams of HBCUs. The sports apparel juggernaut is deeply committed to the success of the community, and our major event of Airing of the Quilts, we're going to hope to see you all there on October the 4th. I was pleasantly surprised at our Airing of the Quilts festival last year when a lady came to me holding a quilt, and she introduced herself and she said, "This is one of those $10 quilts that Father Walter sold to my father back in 1966. So that was an amazing moment. It was wonderful that she got a chance. She said, "I've been wanting to come to the community." So I said, "Well, now you get a chance to see where it all started." So that was a wonderful thing. As I keep saying, the legacy continues. So I thank those of you who were able to tour the building yesterday, and I'm certain that Kim encouraged you all to become a friend of the bin, where a generous donation of $50 on a recurring annual basis will help fund that annual event annually. So in your welcome package, you will find more information on how to look up the Quilting Bee and the Freedom Quilting Bee Legacy, and more about airing of the quilts. Once you become a friend of the band, you'll get a welcome packet that will include a pin that has a replica of a Lucy T. Petway quilt and the opportunity for you to have your name or the name of a loved one embroidered on that year's quilt. Whatever year you provide your donation, we make a quilt each year, and we have embroidered names on that quilt for those who have donated for us. I have shared with you quite a bit of history, and a lot of it you all heard yesterday, and I thank you for sitting through this and hearing it again from me. As I mentioned, they were able to purchase land to buy the building. So they actually purchased 24 acres of land, and the Freedom Quilting Bee sold 10 of those acres to land to families who had been evicted by those who had lost their homes when they were evicted because they had registered to vote. Many of the descendants of those families live on that land still today. The remaining 14 acres will be used where we're going to be building different things. We're going to actually build cabins where when people come to the community, there'll be a place to stay, and you can spend some more time there getting to see what's going on in the community. So we've received funding from various state and federal agencies to help realize this vision. The National Trust of Historic Preservation funded the site planning for us. The Alabama State Council on the Arts has funded construction drawings of different construction phases that we're going to do. One that we're going to begin in July of this year, where we're going to convert our old daycare center into a quilt workshop. The Legacy has been awarded a grant from the Educational Foundation of America to redesign the original roof structure of the building. So we're proceeding, we're progressing. In closing, I would like you to know that a little bit goes a long way, and I thank each of you for all of the little bit that you continue to do in your everyday life, whatever that little bit is, and never think that your little bit is too little, because you never know how that little bit impacts someone else's life. Thank you all for listening at me here today, for inviting me here today. For those, again, who traveled there yesterday to actually see our site and see our history, I'm glad you got the opportunity to go, and we invite you to come anytime, especially during airing the quilts, but anytime. So thank you again for having me. I appreciate it. And if you have any questions, I'll be glad to entertain any questions that you may have, if there is time. Okay. Absolutely. Sure, absolutely. Okay.
Thanks so much. First, I would just like for you to thank the women yesterday for the delicious lunch they prepared for us.
Absolutely.
Really welcome, and somebody was even nice enough to give me the recipe for the vegetables. I am curious to know if you have any idea what the voter turnout rate is in these things.
So the community, so it would actually be Wilcox County as a whole, because the voting numbers aren't calculated specifically on one particular area. So where the Quilting Bee sits is in Alberta, Alabama. Come on down, as we call it, down the road is Gee's Bend. So there are two communities melded together right there. I would say I don't live in Alberta. I don't live in Alabama. My husband was in the military. He's retired, and we've been nomads for over 32 years. So, but I would say from what I've heard in the community, and I'm sorry for her question was, what do I think is the voter turnout now in the area where I'm from, in Gee's Bend in Alberta? I think that it is probably 80%. And I think the reason that it's not 100% is because, there's still that thought of my vote doesn't count. When people ingrain something into people from time to time, and when you see evidence of something not happening, it sometimes becomes a struggle to do it when you don't even know that you're doing. Like my mom said, they would quilt, and even if they only got $2, that's what they thought was they would do that and they would make from that. It's hard for some people to realize that. But there are efforts in the community to vote for everything, every time. So that is a staple in our community, is to exercise your vote, your right to vote.
Thank you. Really enjoyed the presentation. One of the things that you described is, I believe, a concern of all of us here, and that is that I'm hearing between the lines, you're saying there are not as many quilts being made today as there were, at one time, and that children are going to university and getting master's degrees and doctor's degrees and the whole bit, which is wonderful. We're excited. What that also says is that the tradition is getting lost. So what is the community doing, if anything, to continue the tradition and make sure that the gorgeous quilts don't disappear?
So I'm glad you asked that. So her question, they asked me to repeat the question. So her question basically was, because of the fact that, our families are growing up and children are going to universities and such, is quilting becoming a lost art there? My answer to that is basic, and what are we doing to help that? So my answer, first of all, is that no, it's not really becoming a lost art. There are more people there, younger people that are quilting that I didn't even know. As I mentioned, I had been away from home for years. And when I came back and I became ingrained with the legacy and began to work with them again, I found that there were so many younger people than me who actually knew how to quilt. Now, they may not have been doing it on an everyday basis, but they knew how to quilt. And one of the things that we found that we wanted to do was to do just that, was to continue that legacy. And every year, since we have been celebrating Juneteenth, we actually have a festival there at the Quilting Bee, and it is geared toward the youth. We get them in, show them how to quilt a quilt block. They are able to do that and take that home with them that day. And then we're going to start also having quilt workshops based on younger children, and to ensure that they continue with that art form. I didn't get it, but some of them are still, they got it.
Thank you.
Yes. Oh, yes.
These questions, I have one or two questions from online. This one came from Karen. Are we able to watch the film that you showed anywhere else?
Yes, thank you, Karen, for asking. You can actually watch the video in its entirety. It's called With the Fingers of Love, and it was actually produced here by the University of Alabama Media Department. So it was actually out, Reverend Walter's wife, who was on the video as well, Elizabeth, she was actually working here at the time, and they actually produced it here. So you can actually go on YouTube, and it's With the Fingers of Love, Freedom Quilting Bee, and it'll pull right up. And you'll see a picture of my mom there in that purple dress, and that's it.
Thank you. And my second question came from Sarah Brady. As the quilts became popular in New York, did the quilters have to switch to using new fabric instead of old clothing?
Thank you, Sarah. So the question is, as the quilts became popular in places like New York and all of that, did they switch using different materials? So they actually switched using different materials, not just because they were becoming popular in other places, but because the textile industry was booming. You were able to get more cloth. And the reason that they were using jeans and worn out clothes and all of that was because they couldn't afford to go and buy those bolts of cloth. But at that point, they were able to. And with mass production, they were able to do it easier with purchasing the bolts of quilt that they could now afford to purchase. And that was the main reason. But however, many women still quilting from their home, even though the quilting bee was there and all of that, they would quilt there and quilt their home because they were still doing their own thing. You remember, this is something that they grew up with. They still made their quilts from those, anything that they wanted to make, because that was their eye of artistry that they didn't even recognize that they were doing. Yes, I'm sorry, I think it was someone over here. She had her first and then over here.
I'm so grateful to have had the opportunity, to go to G-Span, to meet all the lovely people, to have you here sharing with us. Is this, I came across the G-Span quilts from the artistic perspective, the textile perspective, did not realize the phenomenal, important historical impact. Is that in the curriculum in the schools?
Heck no.
We are on your project list, because this is important stuff.
So, I say heck no, and excuse my pun, but, we do have teachers, when we talk about the children of the quilters who grew up there that have moved on and done, a lot of those are teachers. So a lot of those build it into their own curriculum. They build that history of quilting and all of that into their own. But, as far as it being into the Alabama public school, I would doubt that very seriously. So, yes, but you're right. It is something that absolutely needs to be taught because it is absolute history. Okay.
Her question makes me think of another question besides the one I have, so I'll give you
Yes.
one. Another question. I was talking with a friend of mine, an artisan in Guatemala, and I said, what do you guys need or what's going on? And it became a very wide-ranging conversation. And she said that one of the things that really pissed her off was that when the schools, elementary on up, are teaching business, they're talking about pollo con perro, it's like McDonald's, and they're talking about pizza, and they're talking about that stuff, and they never talk about, and this is to the kids living in rural communities, they never talk about local efforts, small business, things that people actually can do in their community, which she thinks is probably part of the whole migration thing, because they don't know that such a thing would be. So that's a good idea. Now, do I remember my own question? Do the G-Span quilters ever participate in things like the Houston Quilt Festival? Or, there are a bazillion quilters in the United States and a lot of quilting festivals. Do they ever go? Or,
So I am sure. So the question is, do the G-Span quilters, go out on exhibits of different, high profile festivals and stuff across the country? And the answer to that is yes. And it's not just the G-Span quilters, it's the quilters from the entire community. And that community spreads to the whole County Road 29 and others. But yes, they do. And as a matter of fact, they actually was in New York a couple of weeks ago, or maybe about a month or so ago. They're planning on going to several other places in the upcoming months. So just like the invitation that you all gave to me today to come, there more and more of those invitations are coming. That was the staple of it. My mom traveled back in the 60s and 70s and 80s when the quilting bee was at its heyday. She traveled and some of the other ladies with her, and they went with exhibits all over the United States all the time. And so they traveled a lot. And so when the quilting bee closed, then that's when it stopped. But when the creation of the G-Span quilters as an alternative effort came about, they began traveling as well. But it's picking up a little bit more now and everything. And when they started again, you remember, more online things were happening. So people weren't not necessarily just inviting them to come for exhibits, because COVID happened and all that. So they were doing a lot of online stuff and growing the business that way. So, but yes, those invitations are coming and, more and more are coming.
So
So,
I wonder if they go for their own benefit, not only if they're invited to present, but I mean, like all of these people here,
right.
some are presenting, but most of us just came to talk to each other.
Absolutely. And they do that as well because we're now getting more and more information from groups like WAR. And we can actually, put that out to the community and share with them that they're able, check in and register and go and, participate in this. So a lot of them actually do. A lot of the staple quilters in our community are still kind of elderly. I would say 50, 60 up. So, a lot of them aren't always traveling, but some of them do, I say. So,
I think I have time to take, I got 3 takers here, so I'm gonna do that in an effort to keep us on track. And so let me start.
I respectfully would like to make a slight correction in something you said earlier. It was asked about the voter percentage in Wilcox County. It's a lot lower than you said.
Oh,
but there's
really?
a reason why.
Mm.
It was much higher, as you quoted. But within the last few years, the state of Alabama has been closing polls.
True.
And we can't get to them. And it's also illegal in the state of Alabama to help anyone in line to vote. So if you're in a 3-hour line, you can go to jail if you give someone a couple of words.
Absolutely.
And it's illegal to have a handicap in line to vote.
Right.
Or an elderly. So that's why the voting numbers are about that. It's for, it's around minority communities.
Thank you for that. Yes, I appreciate that. Absolutely. That is absolutely true. Yes. And Eddie was just reminding me that Kim mentioned to them yesterday that the quilting bee will be participating, the legacy will be participating in QuiltCon 2026 in North Carolina. So and one of the reasons that we usually have our airing of the quilts on the Columbus Day weekend, but we're having it a weekend earlier this weekend. But we're having it a weekend earlier because of a festival that's in Kentucky. That same weekend, the Columbus Day weekend. So we wanted our quilters to be able to participate in both. So, and all of our visitors.
I had the privilege of visiting Gene's Bend yesterday, and I think the lady's name was Florence that I talked with.
Okay.
And in a quilt that I had read, they mentioned the quilt blocks that help the runaway slaves with different signals.
Right.
And researching it, I've also seen where some people say that is not true, but she did verify that is very true. And my question is, has any of the younger people thought about documenting her, I don't know, I've lost my mind's lost word, but documenting her verbal, stories.
Right.
To write a book and teach things down on paper where in the future, other people can read about it and know that it did actually happen. I think that would be wonderful.
Absolutely. Yes. Thank you for mentioning that. I appreciate that. And yes, that has been a point of interest for years where people have said that, messages were not put in quilts, but those pictures, those directions, you have to remember slaves were not, or most of them were not taught how to read or write. So they followed things, directions and things by pictures. And so it was absolutely, from what I've been told through my family history, that it was absolutely true that messages were placed in quilts as people carried those so they would know where each Underground Railroad stop was or a safe house was. As far as keeping that story and having it being able to be documented, I do believe that some of the younger people who have returned to the community now are doing some of those efforts, but that is something that the legacy will probably certainly get involved in because, again, it's all about the legacy for us and keeping all of that alive. Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay.
Thank you.